click, click, click. One after another, small video images are reflected in your glasses in the darkness. It's late at night. The room is lit only by the glow of the computer screen, which he has been staring at for 3 hours. The door is locked and a blanket has been placed at the bottom so that no light can escape the room. He wears headphones, so no one else in the house can hear the exaggerated sighs and moans. He doesn't want his secret to be discovered. He occasionally watches the same video twice, but finds that boredom sets in quickly. He always feels an insatiable urge to click on new videos that might feature women he doesn't recognize. While he clicks on videos with his left hand, the touch of his right hand keeps him on the verge of orgasm. Sometimes he is shocked by what he sees, but it doesn't take long for him to get used to what previously disturbed him. In fact, what once excited you no longer has its original vigor. As a video game addict, he has progressed through many levels and there is no turning back. The images that fill his mind every night resurface as soon as he wakes up in the late morning and accompany him throughout the day. It's hard for him to think about anything else. He has little motivation to do anything. The people he interacts with throughout the day have become like ghosts, there, but not really there. He has difficulty looking someone in the eye. But it does not matter. His world of excitement awaits him every night when everyone has gone to bed. Prevalence of pornography. What I just described is tragically more common than many of us realize. The statistics on internet pornography use are alarming, to say the least. It is estimated that pornography represents 30% of the total data transferred over the internet. Pornhub, just one of the millions of porn sites on the internet, but not the most popular, reported 33.5 billion visits in 2018. Daily visits now exceed 100 million. Every minute 64,000 new visitors arrive. In 2010, it was estimated that 12% of all websites were pornographic. This means that in 2010 there were more than 24 million porn sites. A 2014 survey revealed that among Americans, 43% of men and 9% of women reported having viewed pornography in the past week. Only 34% of American men reported not viewing pornography in at least a year. For women, the number was 72%. Among professing Christians, the statistics are also alarming. The same 2014 survey revealed that just under 40% of professing Christian men reported watching pornography during the previous week. Among evangelical Protestants who attend church at least 3 times a month, 29% of men and 4% of women reported having viewed pornography in the previous week. 1 in 5 youth pastors and 1 in 7 senior pastors in the U.S. admit to viewing pornography regularly. There are more than 50,000 church leaders. What all these statistics don't reveal is the damage done to millions of lives, marriages, and families by pornographic indulgence. Scientific evidence shows, for example, that those who regularly view pornography on the internet are actually rewiring their brain circuits. This rewiring has spawned a new physiological phenomenon: young men suffering from erectile dysfunction. Due to habitual exposure to internet pornography, they have become incapable of having sex with a real woman. They can only reach orgasm by masturbating to pornography. Imagine what this means for your future or current marriages. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of pornography's devastation on human lives. The good news is that there is a way to recover. Keep reading. Pornography, however, is definitely not your friend. Pornography, what is it? When I was a child, the only way to view pornography was to buy or borrow a copy of Playboy magazine. In the early 1970s, a quarter of all American college students did just that. However, the nude images in Playboy were mild compared to what is considered pornographic today. No one in 1953, when the first issue of Playboy was published with a centerfold featuring Marilyn Monroe, could have predicted the sinister evolution of pornography. Who in 1953 would have imagined that one day hundreds of millions of pornographic videos, including many that are unspeakably vile and perverse, would be just a few clicks away on a device everyone would carry with them everywhere, their cell phone? This phenomenon resulted in the disappearance of the print version of Playboy in 2020. Pornography is so widespread today that it is almost unavoidable. In fact, pornography has become so common that what would once have been considered pornographic by a large percentage of people is now considered pornographic by no one. Explicit sex scenes in R-rated films and popular television series like Game of Thrones, for example, are pornographic by definition, but many professing Christians have no qualms about viewing them. I remember a pastor in Belgium who told me that such scenes were not pornographic, but rather erotic. So for him, they were good to watch. And even what is considered pornography today has been segmented into hardcore and softcore standards, with the latter being acceptable in many minds, while the former is questionable or a matter of personal preference. So what makes something pornographic? Pornography is defined in the dictionary as printed or visual material containing the explicit description or display of sexual organs or activities intended to stimulate erotic rather than aesthetic or emotional feelings. Therefore, not only photos and videos can be pornographic, but also words printed on a page. Again, note that pornography can be an explicit depiction of sexual activity intended to stimulate erotic feelings. Novels often include pornography, as the scenes depicted are written by the authors and consumed by readers to stimulate erotic feelings. The authors describe in words what resembles a scene from a porn film. It's pornography. When people claim that, on the same basis, the Bible contains pornography, they ignore several key components of the definition of pornography. First, pornography is an explicit description, that is, stated clearly and in detail. Mentioning that someone has committed adultery, like David and Bathsheba, is not the same as an explicit description of the passionate and sensual movements of an adulterous couple. Second, pornography is intended to stimulate erotic rather than aesthetic or emotional feelings. The biblical story of David and Bathsheba's adultery is certainly not intended to stimulate readers' erotic feelings, but rather to inform them about the character of God, sin, and its consequences. And while certain passages from the Bible's famous Song of Solomon, which we'll look at in detail later, may stimulate erotic feelings in the minds of some imaginative readers, the language and story are not explicit, like what you'd find in a book. Novel, but intentionally vague and poetic. How beautiful and charming you are, my love, with all its charms. Your stature is like a palm tree, and your breasts like her curls. I said, I will climb the palm tree. I will seize its stems. Oh, may your breasts be like clusters of vines, and the scent of your breath like apples, and your mouth like the best wine. Psalm 7, 6-9 below. Pornography and lust. The Bible, written long before the invention of printing, photography, and videography, understandably never mentions the words pornography or pornography, nor does it condemn indulgence in them. However, it warns against meditating on inappropriate sexual images. The English word for this is lust. Jesus warned against lust, saying, "Everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." Matthew 5:28. When someone desires, they commit adultery in their heart, an obvious reference to imagining a sexual encounter. And it is not just imagining the sexual act that constitutes lust, but also what usually always precedes it. To mentally undress someone you are not married to is to covet them. Of course, lust has always been a sin, even before Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. He was not inventing new regulations on the spot, but rather elucidating what was already found in the Mosaic Law. The Greek word translated lust in Jesus' prohibition in Matthew 5:28 is epithumio, and it is translated elsewhere in the New Testament as desire and greed. When Paul, for example, quoted in Romans 7:7 the 10th commandment, "You shall not covet," the word he used for covet was epithumio. We know that the 10th commandment prohibits coveting what belongs to your neighbor, including your wife. All of this gives us good reason to think that the 10th commandment addressed, among other things, the sin of lust. Men who lust after their neighbors' wives usually do not do so because their neighbors' wives have great cooking skills. Pornography, as everyone knows, arouses lust. Through sexual images, pornography awakens sexual desire and places those who indulge in it in an imaginary and illicit sexual encounter. So the most basic reason to avoid all pornography, it is designed to arouse lust. Pornography is not your friend. Let us remember again that God loves us and that He invented sex. As the creator of sex, He knows that lust, including the lust aroused by pornography, robs people of the best sex, because the best sex occurs between two people of the opposite sex who are committed to each other in a covenant of marriage for all life. Lust, however, opens the door to a third person, or multiple people, in the marriage. A mental affair is certainly not as wrong as a real affair, but it is an affair and therefore a sin against one's spouse. It is not treating your spouse as you want to be treated, and, therefore, it is a violation of the most fundamental ethics there is, the Golden Rule, see Luke 6:31. This is the second most basic reason to avoid all pornography. It can rob you of the best sex as God intended. What lust is not. Having defined what lust is, it may be helpful to define what it is not. Sexual desire, in general, is not lust, as it is given by God, see chapter 1. Observing or admiring the physical attractiveness of a clothed member of the opposite sex is not lust. The scriptures describe both Rachel and Esther as being beautiful in form and countenance, Gen 29:17, S2:7, two characteristics that could be admired without transgression. I think it is safe to assume that they were both very well dressed. Modestly by modern standards. The scriptures tell us that Sarah and Rebekah were both very beautiful, so much so that their husbands feared they would be murdered by lustful men who might lust after their wives, Gen 12:14, 24:6. The Bible also mentions the beauty of Abigail, Bathsheba, Tamar, Abishag, Queen Vashti, and Job's daughters, 1 Sam 25:3, 2 Sam 11:2, 13:1, 1 Kings 1:3, Esther 1 verse 11. Job 42:15. Joseph was beautiful in form and appearance, Gen 39:6, which made him very desirable to Potiphar's lascivious wife. The scriptures say of Saul, there was no man among the people of Israel more handsome than he, 1 Sam 9:2. David is described in the Bible as being blushing, with beautiful eyes and handsome appearance, 1 Samuel 16 verse 12. His impressive genes appear to have been passed on to his son Absalom, of whom it is written, "Now in all Israel there was none so handsome as Absalom, so highly praised, from the sole of his foot to the top of his head there was no blemish in him." 2 Samuel 14:25. He was a hunk. In addition to all of this, notice that Jesus did not say, "Everyone who notices an attractive woman has already committed adultery in his heart." No, it is only when one desires that one is committing adultery in the heart. Even though it may not be lewd to admire the attractiveness of a member of the opposite sex, it is certainly insensitive for those who are dating, courting, engaged, or married to allow their attention to focus for too long on someone other than their partner. Significant other. Telling your husband, "I just met our new neighbor and he's cute," or telling your fiancé, "Our waitress is really pretty," is stupid with a capital C, other women's beauty, as they sometimes do. Intelligent men sincerely say, "Well, she's certainly not as beautiful as you in my eyes." Women can certainly be guilty of lust, but it is much more common among men simply because their sexual desire is visually triggered. No doubt this is why Jesus addressed men in his warning about looking at a woman lustfully. Of course, nowadays, as men regularly encounter half-naked women, in person and through the media, it often takes very little effort to mentally undress them, since they are already practically undressed. Trying to just admire your beauty while avoiding lust would seem like self-deception. To avoid lust, men must look away, something that requires willpower, as the desire to keep looking is strong and embedded in their brains. The smartest strategy for men who want to avoid lust is to avoid stimulation, but even the wisest men in this regard will inevitably be ambushed. And indeed, when good men stumble in lust, the women who caused them to stumble bear the blame. Jesus said, "It is inevitable that stumbling blocks will arise, but woe to the one through whom they come." Luke 17:1. Adam certainly had it easy in that regard. Come to think of it, lust was an impossible sin to commit, as there was only one woman in the world, at least initially. I assumed he could have created an imaginary woman in his mind and desired her. But this brings me to my last point about what lust is not. You cannot lust after your spouse. Mentally imagining any aspect of a sexual relationship with your spouse is never wrong. On the contrary, it is good, as it may very well lead to another wonderful sexual experience that increases your love for each other and for God. Along those lines, a male reader wrote to me to ask if it was okay to take discreet digital photos or videos of his wife for a private collection of sacred porn that might help him resist the temptation of profane porn. I could think of no reason why this would be a sin, and I gave him my statement with two qualifications. One, his, hopefully flattered, wife must be willing to cooperate unreservedly with his plan, and he must have sure that there is no way your private collection could become public, something that has embarrassingly happened to many people. The addictive and habituating nature of pornography. One of the most interesting books I read in preparation for writing this chapter is called Your Brain on Porn, Internet Pornography and Emerging Science of Addiction by Gary Wilson. It is not written from a Christian or biblical perspective, but it certainly affirms what the Bible has to say about the addictive and habituating nature of sin. Obviously, God allows free moral agents to make sinful choices that often result in painful consequences. Those who persist in sinful choices often find themselves enslaved to negative behaviors that become increasingly harmful to them. According to Paul, this is actually a sign of God's wrath upon them. For the wrath of God is revealed, not will be revealed, but rather is revealed in the present tense, from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Because that which is what is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. Therefore God gave them up, in the lusts of their hearts, to uncleanness, so that their bodies might be dishonored among them. For they exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature instead of the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason God gave them over to degrading passions, for their women exchanged the natural function for that which is unnatural, and in the same way also the men abandoned the natural function of the woman and burned in their desire for one another, men with men committing indecent acts and receiving in their own persons the due penalty for your error. And just as they no longer saw fit to acknowledge God, God gave them over to a depraved mind, to do things that are not proper, being filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, wickedness, full of envy, murder, conflict, deceit, malice. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, presumptuous, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, without understanding, untrustworthy, without love, without mercy. And although they know the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, but also give sincere approval to those who practice them. Romans 1:18-20, 24-32. Part of God's judgment on sin is increasing enslavement to it, which may include giving sinners over to degrading, sexual passions. Many pornography users can testify that they have experienced this phenomenon. In Your Brain on Porn, Wilson describes in detail the addictive and habituating nature of high-speed internet pornography that so often plagues those who venture into it. The identical chemical reward functions of the brain that result in addictions to gambling, junk food, nicotine, and cocaine also work against the pornography user. He finds himself wanting it. And just like drug addicts who need higher doses to reach the same highs, internet porn users soon find that the explicit videos that initially stimulated them sexually lose their potency. Then, predictably, they degrade to increasingly extreme and perverse genres of pornography, which also ultimately fail to stimulate them sexually. For this reason, porn sites organize their videos into categories. When regular users inevitably become bored with vanilla porn, they may venture into other genres. Gay and lesbian pornography, incest pornography, transgender pornography, amputee and disabled pornography, female domination pornography, rape and forced sex pornography, gang rape pornography, group sex pornography, sadomasochism pornography, when participants obtain sexual pleasure by inflicting or receiving pain or humiliation, bukkake pornography, when multiple men ejaculate on a woman's head or face, bestiality pornography, sex with animals, blood pornography, when rape victims are killed and dismembered, and more are waiting for the user who is getting used to their current gender. All of this is a third reason why porn is not your friend. It is addictive and habituating, and draws victims further into its slavery. Reboot. Scientific evidence now clearly shows that regular pornography users become sexually conditioned by the pornography they view. Just as Pavlov's dogs were conditioned to salivate at the sound of a bell, pornography users become conditioned to become sexually aroused only by some form of pornography. And conditioning is not really psychological, but physiological. Porn users' brains actually change as neurochemicals trigger the rewiring of nerve connections. Here's an example of what brain scientists call neuroplasticity, defined as the brain's ability to form and reorganize synaptic connections, especially in response to learning or experience. Some heterosexual pornography users have found that when heterosexual pornography is no longer sexually arousing them, and they begin to explore gay and lesbian pornography, their brains become conditioned so that only homosexual pornography can arouse them sexually. At this point, some become afraid or convinced that their sexual orientation is actually homosexual. This contradicts the idea that homosexuality is innate from birth or genetically predetermined. Likewise, users of homosexual pornography sometimes find that when homosexual pornography no longer excites them sexually and they begin to explore heterosexual pornography, their brains become conditioned so that only heterosexuals can porn arouse them sexually, which can be a frightening thought for homosexuals whose identities are completely tied to a homosexual lifestyle. Friends who seek wisdom and knowledge, this content does not end here. In the next videos, we will talk more about this same subject. I ask for your kindness. If you are not subscribed to this channel, you can subscribe, leave a like, and leave your opinion below. There is a lot people interested in knowing what your opinion is on this subject. Shalom.